women today are pissed. The overturning of Roe vs. Wade has many ladies feeling like their rights have been stripped from them. Black women in particular could be the most impacted by this decision because they lead the charge in abortion, and these restrictions could disproportionately impact them. Combine that with the repeated assumption that black women are being brutally slaughtered like cattle. It's said that every 6 hours a black woman is killed. And who was primarily guilty of these crimes? Black men, of course, the biggest perpetrators of single-parent households and homicide, as they put it, and the only men out there today who simply do not protect their women. This is why so many black women hated Kevin Samuels and were so happy when he died, because all he did was make the problems worse for them. After all, black women are being hit from both sides, and they have nowhere to run, except to, of course, themselves, which some of them are doing. But even black female alliances are splintering off. It seems as if black women are being left more and more in a vulnerable place. But what if I told you that most of the fears driving the black female conversation online are untrue? What if I told you that the assumptions behind black femicide are lies? Why? Because they create misunderstanding, false assertions, reinforce dangerous stereotypes, and at the end of the day, drive unnecessary division between black men and black women. If the goal is to truly understand what is harming black women, then we first have to accurately assess the situation. And over-conflating or misrepresenting numbers will not get us closer to the answer. In this video, I'll tell you why your beliefs about black femicide are probably false. I'll also unpack the things that are really hurting black women today according to what the facts and sources tell us. Let's start with the common claim that every 6 hours a black woman is brutally killed by a black man. Y'all, this is false. First off, the assumption can be directly traced to popular claims made by Nazis. What they assert is that black people, aka black men, are the most brutal men and responsible for majority of all crimes, although they are only 13% of the population. They are prone to violence. Now, let's transfer that claim to the black community, and now we see how it can be taken out of context in order to promote misandrist ideas that the majority of black men are violent and that they physically abuse their women. These women and Nazis go as far as to say that white men aren't violent at all and are much kinder to their women. But neither of them ever address the fact that there is no history of black men invading and murdering entire continents of people. And for you history buffs out there who are about to object, no, not even the Caliphate of Al-Andalus and the Iberian Peninsula consisted of the enslavement of white people on slave plantations because of their race. Yet they're still painted as the most violent, aggressive, and brutal men. Imagine that. Now, let's look at the data they use to make these claims. They go straight to the FBI crime stats and misrepresent arrests as convictions. For one, white people are less likely to be arrested for a crime than black people, and most reported crimes today do not even lead to an arrest. Even if we assume that the majority of crimes are from black men, in reality, 1/3 of all crimes are unsolved and cannot be racially categorized. Furthermore, once we look at convictions, 97% of murder convictions are from a plea deal. Innocent people take plea deals when they feel they have no way of proving their innocence due to a lack of proper representation or lack of resources. The imbalance disproportionately affects the black community, which is why to date, the majority of DNA exonerations, aka those men who were falsely convicted and later on proved innocent, are black men. With all of these missing variables, considerations, and details, it's literally impossible to conclude that black men are more violent than white men or any other group of men by nature of who they are. It's simply false. Now, when you do look at data related to homicide and even domestic abuse, we find the following interesting facts. First off, there is no legitimate basis for viewing femicide in the black community as more likely than the white community. The data on this is very clear. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, The rates of violence were nearly the same across ethnic lines. For example, a poor white person in an urban environment was just as likely to be assaulted as a poor black person in an urban environment. When controlled for comorbidities such as heart disease, cancer, and fibroids, there was no significant difference between femicide among black women and white women. When you control for income, you get the same result. In majority of cases, the data sets show the same thing. Women initiate interpersonal violence more than men, and black women initiate IPV more than any other race of women. I also explained this in my previous video. It is important to go back to the legacy of racism in the feminist movement. The white feminist movement was rooted in white nationalism. The original feminists wanted to get a piece of the white supremacist pie. They were fully in support of white nationalism and denied non-white women a place in their environment. The reason that women's rights in the 19th Amendment even passed was due to the influence of women's empowerment in international black movements like the UNIA, ACL under Marcus Garvey. So we can say that black men played a bigger role in the empowerment of women than white men did. Tommy Curry also outlines this in his book, Man Not. Men like Alexander Crummell and Martin Delany were much more involved in the empowerment of women than their white counterparts. Now let's turn to another popular source usually cited when making claims about black femicide, UJIMA. While they do cite their sources, when you actually look at the sources, you'll find the following. None of the studies shows that it's the men and the men themselves who are responsible for homicide. Every study lists societal and institutional disparities as factors that lead to interpersonal violence. For example, let's go over the following studies mentioned within UJIMA. According to the 2010 to 2012 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey nationally, 45% of black women experience contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. The same survey showed that 40% of black men experience contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So the rates of IPV among women and men here are pretty much the same. The 2010 study used datasets limited to phone surveys which are demographically skewed. It also noted that the IPV rates for Native American women were worse than Black American women. The 2011 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, which cited, showed similar trends with Native American and multiracial women having higher rates of IPV than Black women. There were also some methodological limitations. A study with a sample of 1,545 African American and African Caribbean women found that about 40% of the sample experienced intimate partner abuse sometime in their life, and about 27 experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime. For the purposes of this study, IPV was defined as a pattern of physical and/or sexual assault or threats of assault from a current or former intimate partner within a context of coercive control, and IPA was used as a broader term that includes psychological and emotional abuse. Consistent with prior research, having children, being younger, and having a locally born partner were correlated to recent experiences of IPV. Most African American and African Caribbean women who experienced lifetime intimate partner abuse reported physical and psychological abuse, about 31%, and a combination of psychological, sexual, and physical abuse, 30%. Among African American and Caribbean women, having children 18 years old or younger was associated with lifetime interpersonal violence. The Stockman 2014 study had many caveats. In it, we learned that not all Black women are equally impacted by IPV. More specifically, that high rates of medical insurance, marriage status, higher education, and income were all associated with less IPV. According to the CDC, Black women ages 25 to 29 are 11 times more likely as white women in that age group to be murdered while pregnant or in the first year after childbirth. The Sharp, Lagone, and Giagrande study mentioned that Black women and Native American women experience the highest rates of IPV. But it also shows that Black women had the greatest perinatal health disparities and low access to quality health care, both which are high-risk factors correlated to IPV. The study also notes that income and socioeconomic factors are not controlled for in the study, and previous research has shown that racial and ethnic differences in IPV disappear when controlling for these factors. Now, the Chang study has data from the 90s, so it's a bit outdated. Even still, it did not suggest that Black men were inherently killers. Black victims were significantly more likely to be killed by an acquaintance than white victims. The Petrovsky study cites community and societal factors as the primary contributors to homicide rates. It is limited because it focuses on younger populations without comparing their experiences to their elders. It lacked detailed suspect analysis as well as the IPV experience by men. The data here also shows how ethnic differences and issues with integration can strain relationships, which could lead to an increased rate of IPV. For example, if we examine the interracial IPV among Native American and Asian women, the lack of cultural understanding or problems integrating into white society can lead to relationship breakdown within their family and an increase of IPV. Once we examine the data provided by UJIMA and other sources, we see that as women get older or get a higher education or increase their income or get out of lower class, chances of IPV drastically decrease. Therefore, if Black femicide was an issue of Black women being killed by men simply because they're women, then we'd see consistent levels of IPV for Black women of all ages, educational backgrounds, income levels, class, but we don't. So, no matter how you look at it, we cannot accurately conclude that Black men are violent destinies who are disproportionately killing Black women, or that Black men are the boogeyman who have a thirst for violence. We also cannot truthfully say that homicide is in and of itself a female issue. If we want to be specific, homicide generally impacts men more, as most perpetrators and victims of homicide are male. Making an issue that disproportionately impacts men a woman's only issue while ignoring the reality of its negative implications on both is dangerous. Now, do I believe Black women should be cared for? Yes. I am all for education, training, and programs that will give women the tools that they need to be safe. Should women be taught how to look out for red flags and potentially dangerous scenarios? Absolutely. But everything regarding homicide and interpersonal violence must be put in context. I am also a supporter of men. I do not believe in advancing one group at the expense of the other, or in this instance, advancing women's cause while ignoring men's concerns. Much of what we see today on social media is one-sided propaganda, meant to widen the gender divide between men and women and fill the pocketbooks of bad actors. It also gives unhealthy Black women one more reason to double down on their blame Black men narrative, making men the culprit of everything wrong in the community, versus trying to find ways to work with men to bring change. Homicide is largely a byproduct of poverty and economic hardship. Younger, impoverished men and women of all races are more at risk for homicide and other crimes. If we want to have an honest and productive conversation about how to actually limit the premature death of Black women, the topic must include class, economic access, the wealth gap, health, and other underlying factors that contribute to homicide. The conversation should also acknowledge that men are more victimized than women, not as a way to minimize women's issues, but as a way to have a realistic assessment of what's actually going on and why. As the saying goes, it is the truth that sets you free, and we can't expect to get anywhere until we acknowledge the truth. I'm Shay Charday, and I tackle tough topics with truth. Thanks for listening. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and leave your comments down below. Bye!